places? Yes, we do. Do we go to Facebook? Do we go to Twitter? Do we go to Instagram? Do we start to look at, is there information that can help us figure out this story? What is going on? Who is involved? Who else do we need to get involved? Potentially, we get our school resource officer, Deputy Baker, involved in the situation. He'll go to the elementary schools if called upon. He'll go across the street to the middle schools if called upon. Obviously, he spends the majority of his time at the high school in the commons area. Do we need to involve counselors, particularly in the elementaries? They spend an awful lot of time with their counselors as they go through these instances. We do that at the middle school and the high school as well, but having other administrators in the building, we process often with those other administrators, whether it's at high school with Mr. Landry or Mr. Kessel. Obviously Mr. Hoppus has his two in the middle school that he works with. We then review our handbooks. We look at school policy, and we look back at history in Nebsis or in Sims, in Parent Connect, in that platform. Have there been incidences similar in the past? Is this a first incident, or is this a repeat incident? Again, discuss with other administrators in the building. Potentially discussion with Mrs. Fagan or Dr. Hawk down at the district office. If we're talking about something that could warrant a short-term or long-term suspension or an expulsion, then obviously that's a conversation that we have with those two individuals. We then come to a determination of what do our consequences look like. We use our handbook, follow our code of conduct, and look at what consequences fit the infraction. We communicate to students, staff, and parents if possible the findings and the consequences. Obviously, sometimes we can't report that due to confidentiality. We then log the information into our Nebsis accounts, and then we follow up with the student and their parents with what the consequences will look like. What could that look like? An administrative conference, in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, Saturday school. We work with our family, and we'll talk a little bit later about that as far as therapy with any or all that are involved. And then what are our future expectations of those students? What do we expect from them as we move forward with their education at all three levels of the schools? All right, what data do we have for you? We didn't print off all of our Gallup and all of our advanced ed surveys. What we did do is we ran a K-12 behavior count report, and on your PowerPoint you can click on this and it'll pull it up for you as well. But I did bring some hard copies. We run a behavior count report, at the end of each year, and Mr. Hops will talk to you here in just a few minutes about what we do with that information at the end of each year, particularly with our administrators and counselors in our buildings over the course of the summer. We look at potential school improvement goals. We look at what are the infractions that are coming through that are causing the most harm in our building, and what do we do with bullying? What do we do with conflict in our building to try to curb that or try to mitigate that? If you look at all three levels, and I know it's kind of hard to read, but if you look at all three levels in the report that we gave you, consistently disrespect to others and failure to follow rules are the two largest number of volume infractions that we have. So when something comes to us that is a concern, again, whether it's from a student or from a parent, when we go to record those, it may come to us as, hey, I'm being bullied. When we sit down and we do our process and we go through our investigation, it may not actually be bullying. It may be disrespect to others. It may be failure to follow rules. It may be disparaging language. Again, from the definition we started with that Mrs. Nelson talked to you about, if it's consistent, if we look back into Sims, and we see that this is happening over and over, if this has been a report we've already had administrative conferences, it's consistent, it's an imbalance of power, then at that point in time, could it be bullying? Yes, it very well could be, and we follow our code of conduct in order to administer consequences for those students. What other data do we look at? We've had a Gallup student poll over the last, as long as I've been here for 9 years. where we give that to our high school, all of our high school students, all of our middle school students, and I believe our 5th grade students at the elementary schools. And then we give our advanced ed survey, which is now our Cognate survey, and that's done every other year that we give to our students at the high school and the middle school and the elementary schools. When you look, if you have time and you want to look at either of those pieces of data, we use that in coordination with our K-12 behavior count report at the end of each year to review what our focus could be or should be at the 3 levels of schools here at Bennington.
All right, so moving forward, what do we do with that data? So as we, utilization of data. So the behavior stuff you're looking at, like in the middle school, we look at that every 6 weeks at the end of each texter to kind of see what trends and things that we're seeing. We look at that at the semester. And then at the end of the year, we do make adjustments throughout the year. It could be some staff development that we provide. We look at it with our staff. It might be some PBIS teachings to kids that, we start to see maybe it is issues in the bathroom or at lunch. And so we try to hit those a little bit harder. But as you go through, this is K-12, just kind of a broad brush of some things that we do. With the data, we might bring in an appropriate speaker. Like at the middle school, we brought Joe Beckman in last year, which was a very positive thing for our kids. We have Harbor Family Services embedded into what we do. Different behavior interventions we might put into place. Something I'll talk about a little bit later is student connection survey for middle school. So those are just some things that we do or try to do with the data. Next slide talks about our training that we try to do for our staff. So at the beginning of each school year and then at the beginning of second semester, our staff does go through Safe School courses. This past year, these are the Safe School courses that our staff went through. You can see bullying, recognition, and response. Bullying prevention on the school bus, cyberbullying, making schools safe and inclusive for LGBTQ students, and dating violence identification and prevention. We do plan over the summer homeroom curriculum at all 3 levels, and we do look at this. And there are specific lessons in regard to bullying and reporting bullying, specifically taught during homeroom lessons at all levels. We do a de-escalation, behavior intervention training, and then mental health workshop. The next piece we're going to talk to is break into each level to talk a little more in particular about the programming that we offer at each level.
Okay, so elementary programming at top, Mendez Foundation, 2 Good programs. That is the counseling program that we just finished with this past year. So that is the program that we have been using for quite some time. And it contains the 2 Good for Drugs and 2 Good for Violence pieces that are K-5. Different things that are covered in that are being a peacemaker, creating a peaceful environment, problem solving, celebrating differences, anger management, respect for self and others, conflict resolution, and then identifying and managing bullying. Second step is the curriculum that we are adopting for the 2022 school year. That is a link to the presentation that the SEL Strategic Planning Committee put together and shared with you, I believe, last month, so that you can access that as well. We also do small group and one-on-one guidance activities and interventions for reteaching and practice opportunities with students. We have the Common Sense Digital Citizenship curriculum, which is provided and supported through library media. All buildings have family time. We all call it something a little bit different. However, these are intended to focus on 21st century skills that are assessed through gradable rubrics at each level, but they also are intended to form relationships with another adult advocate in the building. We have morning meetings that we do that are scheduled and built into our routine and our schedule. Student of character, we recognize students from each class or grade level for demonstrating positive character traits and choices. We have updated our school-wide behavior tiered system. All buildings have a tiered intervention system, and that is outlined from a behavior matrix that we all have in our handbooks, as well as the steps that go through and then who whether it's teacher, administration, what those steps look like when action occurs in the classroom, if there's a buddy room, and then a need to go to the office. We also have used opportunities such as kindness days and compliment contests throughout the school to focus on specific skills that we're working on in certain areas. And then we also have staff mentors. So essentially, students who have relationships, strong relationships with other staff members within the building, they connect with those adults and check in with them on a regular basis, just to kind of check in on their charts, their point system. This is just those people that might have individual strong relationships with students. We also have the teammates program, and then we tap into our family. We do have someone that comes in. We all have someone that comes in once a week for a period of time. We've also had students receive some of their therapy sessions within the building as well, and that has been very helpful.
All right, for middle school, I'm going to highlight just a few on here. The first one is PBIS. That's a big one in our building, positive behavior intervention supports. We talk to kids all the time about being safe, respectful, responsible, and being kind. We do lessons with those throughout the year. We have a lot of recognition tied to it. This year we did a Badger Buck system, which worked very well. Kind of created a school store, so when we see kids doing good things, exhibiting good behavior, we try to recognize that and reward it. Power of the Paw is something when kids go above and beyond, we want to recognize that. And then we have Learn, Grow, Lead Awards every 12 weeks for kids who are exemplifying really good character. And that's really embedded in what we do. That's been a positive thing. With COVID, we didn't get the opportunity to send kids to the Play Spark Leadership Academy. That's back on track this summer. We have some kids going to it this summer. And then we bring those kids back and they work with us to kind of help us develop kindness events. And in October, it's typically Bullying Prevention Month, and try to work with kids to plan those events. We're going to talk BARC and Safe to Help here in a couple slides. Halpara is one that is K-12 that teachers are able to see what students are doing on their computers during the course of the school day. That has been incredibly helpful, helping keep kids on task, but also there are times where kids are searching things. It might be self-harm. It might be maybe they're having a conversation with a friend through email or something like that pops up, and a staff member is able to see, all right, and report that, hey, this kid is struggling today. It looks like maybe somebody's been doing or saying something mean. It gives us a chance to dive into it. So that Halpara program has been very helpful. Speaking of data, Gallup student survey this year, the one area we looked at that was lower than normal was the sense of belonging that kids had. And so we looked at that and we created a student connection survey and found out that about 80% of our students had a connection to at least one adult in the building, but that means we had 20% that didn't. And in a building of 850 kids, that was about 170 kids that didn't feel like they had a connection to an adult. So we went through that as a staff. We looked at the kids who had the connections, we looked at the kids that didn't, and we made it a priority as a staff to try to figure out how we could continue the connections we had, but also try to help those 20% become more connected. And so that was a priority of ours as we went through the spring.
Okay, at the high school, we've had speakers over the past decade that have come in. Just a highlight of a few of those speakers that have been in here over the last 4 or 5 years. Some clubs that have started, again, talking about finding connections in our building. Students that are obviously involved in activities certainly have a higher grade point average, a higher graduation rate. We are trying to find a community for our students in our building. The Leo Club was started a few years ago by Jenny Bruck and Stephanie Jenkins, and it's a service club. Our Prison Club, started by David Porter and now is being run by Mary Walker. This has been a really good program for Mr. Landry and myself. We've been invited into many of their meetings over the last year and had what I would call some town hall discussions with them on their concerns about bullying in the class or in the hallways in particular, and what we can try to do to help combat some of that. So we talked about the process that I mentioned here just a little while ago with you, and what we need from them as far as reporting for us to help with those situations. And from those conversations, we've started to have more reports come to us, and we've been able to address some more situations over the course of the last 6 to 8 months at the high school. We have Arbor Family that's 1 day a week. As we grow as a building, you have approved more counseling in our building, and so we continue to ask for that as we grow. Again, BARC and Safe to Help will be addressed here. Mr. Hoppus talked about HAPARA. And then we use the information that I talked about earlier from the data collection to help us look at our training, our homeroom lessons that we're providing with our teachers to our students on an every other week basis. Some of those lessons are included there: team building, bullying and dominance, and suicide.
Tag team this one.
Yep.
All right, so Safe to Help it's starting here kind of in the metro area. I think it's going Nebraska wide next year. But we get a lot of reports through that. And so it's an anonymous tip line that parents or students can fill a report out. I think at the elementary, or the middle school and high school, we get a lot of reports. I'm not sure there's a ton that come through the elementary. But that is something that it's pretty big for us because we get reports, we're able to jump in it. BARC is something that runs on our Chromebooks. So when kids, a lot of times the reports on these come at night, or it's the BARC alerts, on the weekend. I would say throughout the course of a year, at least at the middle school, there's probably 30 to 40 times where it's 2 a.m. and we get a call from Safe to Help, and I'm helping them get the address or phone numbers for some parents. Or it's the weekend and we're coming to school to contact parents that your son has just been searching how to commit suicide on BARC, and we just got an alert. So these two pieces are just one more layer that are helpful in helping kids get the help they need possibly, or alert us to something that's going on at school or maybe possibly outside of school. But the BARC alerts, they come in through the day too. We get Safe to Help during the school day, but a lot of times these are the evening, weekend type things. I'll let you speak to high school pieces of that.
Yeah. Very similar. Those Safe to Help reports are often in the evenings and on the weekends, which again, just one more way for students to reach out and to let us know if they're having other students that are causing problems. Consistently at the high school, what we see is so-and-so is doing this on social media. So, that can be easy and it can be difficult to manage and to track and to kind of navigate through. But that comes to us quite often outside of school hours. And again, it's anonymous, so students are hopefully comfortable enough to be able to report incidents that are causing them some concerns. Do we run into students that use it as a way to send us down a rabbit hole with inaccurate information? I wish I could say no, but yes, that happens more often than we wish. But certainly a very powerful tool. Again, BARC similar. We can monitor what's going on their Chromebook, whether they're at school or they're at home. And at times, honestly, personally, I feel like there are times where students, they know that we can monitor that, and they're in their own way reaching out to us through those diaries, I guess, that they write that pop on our end because of the content that's involved. And so those two programs have been really valuable for us to help manage our students in building the last few years. Next steps.
Okay, so looking at the information that we provided you, the next steps that we are looking at is developing a consistent K-12 process to document bullying allegations. As we continue to grow and add administrators, we feel like it's necessary to hold staff development on how we code behaviors. And with that, going along with that, we have talked with regards to using Nexus and the codes that we have, just making sure that we're consistent on what each of those codes means to us and that we are communicating with each other on what those codes mean. And then finally, we do a lot for staff and students explaining delays and ways to report it, and we can provide more information to educate parents. One of the suggestions was an attorney presentation. Karen Hasse has been a person that has presented to the staff and to students as noted. Another suggestion that we received was asking Arbor Family to do some presentations as well for parents and families. Any questions for us?
I think you hit on my question, but I'm just curious on what rises to the level of being included in the behavior account report, and how do we make sure we're consistent from building to building?
So how does students, or how does the behavior get reported into Nexus?
Yes,
So-
behavior account report, you handed out.
Yeah, so essentially, what we have in our handbook at the elementary level, we have a tiered intervention system that's listed. And there's a matrix that's in there, and then there's tiered interventions that go along with that. So when a student, whether it's an incident that occurs that needs immediate attention, then that would be something that would be automatically referred to the office. Otherwise, the expectation is that we follow that tiered intervention. When we get to tier 3, that is an office referral. When that comes to me, that is myself and or a counselor working with the student. When I'm interacting with the student and I'm making a parent contact, then I'm putting that into Nexus.
Thank you.
Yep. I don't know, 2 big years to come. Okay.
I'd just like to thank you all for the time and resource gathering that you did, and just to acknowledge your question, Alice, and I think there is that hope for the next steps. You're well aware and how we code things so that we can be more consistent as a district, because just from the elementary point of view, there's a school that has 16, there's a school that has 32, there's a school that has 56, and a school that has 245 behavior infractions. And I want to believe that that is a method thing that we need to get on board with. I have a lot to say about this, but for the sake of time, I probably won't. I do just want to highlight my gratitude for the attention on coming up with definitions that might be more specific to our district, and the conversations that we're having on social emotional learning. I like to point out that one of the reasons that the language of social emotional learning has become a hot topic can sometimes be politicized, but truly, there was a mom of a 6-year-old boy who lost her son at the Sandy Hook Elementary shootings, and she created a program called Choose Love Movement. It's a national and international movement. It is one of many social and emotional learning programs that exist. We are committing to using Second Step this year for the curriculum, and yes, we have done our homework, and yes, we believe in the validation of the research, and we are buying into this program that does not cost the district, but looks at ways that we can start at an elementary level, provide a means that is effective for the classroom teachers and staff to use efficiently, and that really does acknowledge the inclusive desires, needs of all of our students here in our growing community. So thank you, administrators, teachers, staff of all kinds, for putting some attention towards whatever you might call it, the soft skills, the behavior intervention, the SELs, and all the various terms that we might use as we look at preventing violence in our schools. Thank you.
I too thank you for the good work and kind of pulling together for us the really the huge array of ways that you think about fulfilling our mission, which is to create safe schools where we can maximize every kid's potential. And we know that they can do that in places that are safe and where they feel like they belong. So I appreciate you elevating that for us and explaining the belonging piece, because we know those are best environments for kids to excel. And I just wanted to note that I do feel like there's a good balance around, we have to define bullying and these dangerous behaviors that are not safe for kids, for themselves, or for others. And I recognize that we need to say, this is not okay, and sort of identify what that is. But I wanted to highlight that I feel like, as I read through and presented, there is this, let's raise the bar on that in our schools. Let's make sure we prioritize one another. What does that look like to be kind? Kindness to one person may not necessarily be that to someone else. Gosh, that's sort of so one person may love to be recognized in front of others, but that might not feel comfortable. And that's really about prioritizing where individuals are. And I really appreciate that you have a balance about that and what you shared with us today, that we can really raise the bar in how we prioritize and honor the talents, the strengths, and the individuality of our colleagues, of our classmates, and of our teachers in the classroom. So I do see that, and I was just pleased to see that variety. Thanks for sharing it with us.
I just wanted to add it too. Like right now, we're looking at infractions, which seems to be more of like here's the area of growth. But what the infractions don't really tell you is how much individual students have grown along the way. And so when we do look at data, we do look at previous year, we look at student IEP, we look at student behavior plans. So, we have students who maybe had 8 suspensions last year and only had 2 this year. Or maybe they had 29 visits to the office last year and this year they had 16. So and that still sounds like quite a few, but at the same time, that's significant growth. And I appreciate your comment to that because I do think that staff works very hard to build those relationships and to reinforce kindness and just put that adult advocate in place as much as possible.
That appears to be the end of the questions. Thank you for your presentation on that important topic. I believe that brings us to the end of our business agenda for the meeting. We do have an exec session proposed for purposes of discussing potential land acquisition. So to that end, I would move to have the board go into executive session at 7:50? Please tell me it is 7:50. For the purpose of a strategy session with respect to potential land acquisition, as an executive session is clearly necessary for the protection of public interest. Thank you for the second, Allison. We do not expect to take action following executive session. So I imagine most of you will be heading out then for the evening. I want to thank you for attending the meeting this evening and would remind you that our next regular meeting of the board is on July 11th, Monday, July 11th. Potentially a joint meeting with the city if we can get that scheduled. So the time of that meeting will be announced later in public. Jody, we still need to call the roll, don't we?
We do.
Would you please do so?
Allison?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes, this board is in executive session.
Happy